miracle.
Amen.
Okay, so we have 2 days of school now. I was thinking that we will learn a little bit about Yud Beis Tammuz. It's all connected. I'm going to give out this sikha. Anyone heard anything really mind-blowing by any Farbrengen of Gimel Tammuz, you're welcome to share it.
The news stories on here about the Rebbe that I didn't hear about.
So let me hear.
That was the one. The first one was about Yosemite. What? About Yosemite.
Oh, the one that they stole on Shabbos.
Yeah, the one that was so. What were you going to have?
What?
Yeah, so Shabbos in the same Chabad, there were two news stories, but we heard in the dome those two news stories. So it was about the first, no, the second one was about this couple who were in these two bottom who went to who were in LA, California, and then they went into this middle of nowhere, and then they went to this guy who doesn't like cooking on the cooking or whatever, but he directs them to go to Pakistan and tell them to put the chicken and all that. So they went, and he directed them to a place in the middle of
Nowhere.
park, yes. And then they ended up going to this couple's house, a retired lawyer, and he was like not so into Yiddish type and everything, and it's like always asking questions and everything. Anyway, so they got there, they spoke to him, and they ended up putting, Majeski up in his house, and he ended up wearing tefillin and all that. And then they left, and then they wanted to continue, but there was a bushfire, so they left, came back to the city, whatever. And 4 months later, I think, so they were here, and by the Farbrengen, someone was telling a story that the daughter, when she started to be literate, become more observant and everything, the parents cut the tie with her. They were not interested in everything and just cut their tie with her. And then she wrote to the Rebbe, telling the Rebbe, what the situation is and everything. And that was like 2 weeks, and prior to 2 weeks, like going back 2 weeks, and then the two boxing went over and then did all that. And then was it 2 weeks ago or something that the parents came to pay a surprise to the girl, and that's how she got her hands in terms of like asking with the Rebbe and what to do and everything. And then one of the broken was sitting in the
While he was speaking.
yeah, while he was speaking, and he heard the story and he quickly ran over to tell the other friend. And then what happened?
So next time you get lost, you're not really lost. You think you're lost.
It's a river.
Yeah.
There's
And
something
the other one is
you gotta do.
Oscar.
What?
The vodka, the bottle of vodka he gave for the wedding.
Oh, he did, yeah. This guy from Paris.
Yeah.
Okay, very nice. Okay, I want to give this out as well. So just a few things about Yud Beis Tammuz. Yud Beis Tammuz was in the year 1927, and the Frierdiker Rebbe was in jail for close to 30 days. The Rebbe once said and explained that we find something similar by the Alter Rebbe. He was in jail for 53 days. What's so significant by the number 53? There are 53 chapters to Tanya. So he was in jail because he was revealing Chassidus in an unprecedented way. And there was a kitrut, there was a prosecuting angels and voices in the heavenly court against the Alter Rebbe that he's too much. And being that what he revealed was contained mainly in Tanya, which has 53 chapters, that's why he's 53 days in jail. And that's the simple way of understanding it. However, in the Sichas, the Rebbe explains that on a deeper level is that the whole purpose of jail is it's a concealment, that you want to learn Torah, you want to do mitzvahs. In this case, you want to spread Yiddishkeit, spread Chassidus, and there's an opposition. There's something blocking. The only purpose why something is blocking, we just finished saying it's all from Hashem. So the purpose is to be even stronger. And that's what happened with the Alter Rebbe. That after he was released from jail, not only did he continue to teach and spread Chassidus, but he began to spread Chassidus on a whole new level like never before. Practically, what does that mean, a whole new level? It's a difference in quantity and quality. Difference in quantity means if you were able to see one of the books of the Alter Rebbe, of his Maimarim before he went to the jail, the Maimarim were very short and brief, sometimes a few lines on a page. After he went out of jail, he began to say long Maimarim. Now, it's not just about quantity, it's not size. It means that after the Alter Rebbe went out from jail, he began to teach Chassidus and elaborate on the Chassidic concepts in a much more in-depth, intellectual way. And that's why they were long in Maimarim. And that was a whole new level of spreading Chassidus. When we were in yeshiva, yes, Chana.
Are you able to just tell me the difference between a mimer and a sikha?
A mimer and a sikha. First of all, the literal translation of a sikha is a casual conversation.
Okay.
So generally speaking, the Rabbeim would only say Maimor, just a Maimor. A Maimor is a Hasidic discourse. And a Maimor is a very spiritual experience. When the Rebbe says it, to the extent that the Alter Rebbe, and every Rebbe of Chabad following the Alter Rebbe, including our Rebbe, whenever they said a Maimor, they would hold a cloth in their hand. And the reason that's understood was because a Maimor was a very spiritual experience. And they were holding on to something physical as an anchor to be anchored to earth, so to speak, to be grounded while they're saying the Maimer. A Sikha was usually different. Sikha was only said, the Rebbe was sitting by his table, could have been a Shabbos table, a Yontif table for Brengen. Not everybody was present, just family members or some of the older Hasidim, and it would be like sort of a casual conversation. The casual conversation was also about a Rebbe, and about Hasidim, and about stories, but it wasn't a mimer, which is a pure Hasidic academic thing, discourse. Our Rebbe already started sichas, that the sichas themselves are just as academic as a mimer. It's learning and understanding, but still, it still was said in a different way. So how would somebody recognize the difference? When the Rebbe said a mimer, he said it with a tune, which it wasn't the tune that he spoke when he spoke a sikha. He said it with his eyes closed, and he would hold this handkerchief in his hand, this physical cloth. And also, before he started the Maimir, he would say to sing a certain niggin, which we call the Maimer niggin. There was one niggin, they always sang that before the Maimer. So it means the Maimer was a different kind of and it was also more pure Chassidus. Stories, something about the Rambam, Rashi and Chumash, these were all talked about in Sichas. Current events was in a Sikha, not in a Maimer. So if that's the case, being that the Alter Rebbe, in other words, the barriers that were blocking, their purpose was to come out stronger. Like the physical Gashmiz, the Gamashal, would be that, like exercise, when you lift something that's heavy, you're not doing it reluctantly. You're not doing it because somebody wants to beat you up. You know that unless you lift something which is heavy, your muscles won't be developed. So the fact that there's something blocking you and you have to lift this or you have to jump high is to develop those muscles. So the fact that the Alter Rebbe was being blocked from spreading Chassidus was that he should develop even stronger strength to spread even more Chassidus. And that's what happened. After Yud Tes Kislev, that's when it began to spread Chassidus on a whole new level. So the Rebbe said it the same as with the previous Rebbe. So the previous Rebbe was in jail 30 days, and that corresponds to the 30 years that he was Rebbe. In fact, the Rebbe once made a calculation. I never sat down with pen and paper because I just trust what the Rebbe said, that the Frierdiker Rebbe made a point to spell out the hour and minute when he was arrested and the hour and minute when he went out of jail. And the Rebbe said, if you make those calculations, you'll see that the Frierdiker Rebbe wasn't a perfect 30 years. So the time that he was arrested and the time that he was freed corresponds to the amount of years that he was Rebbe. He became Rebbe on the day of Beis Nissen, and the Stalk was on Yud Shvat, so it's not a perfect circle, but nevertheless, it's 30 years. So each year of his leadership was stronger because of the fact that he was in jail. Where do we see by the Frierdiker Rebbe that something changed? By the Alter Rebbe, we see began to reveal Chassidus on a new level. And the Rebbe's answer was that as a result of being in jail, he had to leave Russia. And then he went to Latvia. From there, he went to Poland and eventually came to America. And especially once the Frierdiker came to America, he began to spread Chassidus globally, starting to send shluchim all over the world. Of course, it was nothing then like it is now, but that's when it began. So the Rebbe said that was a result of the jail. That until then, the spreading of Chassidus was somewhat limited to Europe, a little bit in America and other places. But after that, the Chassidus started to be spread on a global level like it was never done before. Talk about this subject. I just want to mention something really incredible and amazing. It's found in a mimer from the Rebbe. It's a mimer that Rebbe once said about Yud Beis Tammuz. First, the Rebbe speaks in this mimer. It's a very deep mimer, a lot of deep inyanim. But the Rebbe explains how a Rebbe, to him, there's nothing that's concealing, nothing that's blocking. He sees through all the curtains. He sees through all the concealments and all the coverings because he sees the emes, and therefore it's not really a concealment. To make this a little bit simple, concealment is always compared to like a teacher who teaches students. And imagine if a teacher is not just a little bit smarter than the students, but on a totally different level. He understands things at a very deep level. Like Shlomo Melech, who needed 3,000 Mishalim to explain what he understood. So imagine if someone like that gives a mashal and another mashal and a third mashal. It's all there to conceal the depth of the concept, because if he won't, the student won't get it. Once the student gets it, then he has to struggle to try to figure out what's the real depth there. And it could take him up to and then gives another mashal, it's more concealed, and another mashal, it's more concealed. Imagine Shlomo Melech, 3,000 concealments. Does he now not see the concept? But to him, everything is clear. Of course. If you're explaining something to somebody who understands less than you, and you give them all sorts of simple ways of understanding it, for them, they get it in a simple way. But for you, nothing has changed. You see clearly all the depth that's there. The same is with Hashem, that even though Hashem created all these incredible concealments, but Hashem sees things openly. The concealments don't block him. So the Rebbe explained that tzaddikim of this caliber, like the Alter Rebbe, they are not affected by the concealments. They see right through it. They see that it's all part of Hashem's plan, and they see what the real purpose is and so on. So then the Rebbe asked the question, if that's the case, that nothing conceals, And one of the proofs, by the way, is the famous story when Alter Rebbe was arrested. Imagine he's being arrested, being taken to jail. And then the Alter Rebbe says, I want you to stop the wagon because I don't travel on Friday. And the general says, sorry, we're not going to do that for you. And the wagon stops. And the Alter Rebbe made the wagon stop. Or the story with the boat, that the Alter Rebbe made the boat stop. If you can make things stop, just go home. Make everything stop and do what you want, if you can do things in a miraculous way. So obviously the reason why it didn't happen, because they knew that there was a divine purpose in going to jail and proving the innocence and proving the emes of Chassidus, and therefore they're all part of it. So if a Rebbe sees everything clearly and there's nothing blocking, how does it make sense to say that the greater light comes out of darkness? There was no darkness to them. Everything was clear. That's not even dark. There's nothing blocking. To us, it was something blocking, but not to the Rebbe. To him, he saw right through everything that's happening. Yeah.
Why would the Heavenly Court have an issue with Hasidus being spread so much?
Well, why wasn't it spread 200 years before the Alter Rebbe? Obviously, it wasn't the time. So there was a debate in the Heavenly Court, so to speak, whether now is the time or it's still not the time. And there were voices, we're talking about in heaven, so that's like by Shammai and Beis Hillel. Both are opinions that come from a Torah perspective. And one opinion was that it's too early, it's still not the time yet to spread Chassidus. And the Alter Rebbe pushed forward that it is the time. And eventually he succeeded. So the Rebbe's answer is that a Rebbe is a shepherd, and a shepherd cares for the sheep. The Rebbe's love for Yidden and his concern for Yidden and his responsibility to guide us and to lead us is not only very important, and not only extremely important, and not only just as important, it's actually more important to him than his own personal avodah. And therefore, the fact that for us it was a concealment is a concealment for him. This is not in the Sikh, but think of the story of Yaakov and Yosef. Yaakov was full of grief because Yosef was killed, right? If you remember the Parsha, Yitzchak, his father, knew about it. He knew that Yosef was really alive, but he wasn't allowed to reveal it. Do you think that Yitzchak was also in pain and suffering and feeling grief?
Yeah. Maybe for Yaakov, but not to the extent.
Right, not for Yosef, but for Yaakov. That his son is suffering so badly, so he's so badly. But there's two ways to look at it. One is like, okay, I am who I am and I know the truth, but I'm also suffering. But once we get to understand, the way the Rebbe explained it, that for a Rebbe, the concern of Yidden is more important, that that's his essence, and that's what he's all about. So therefore, when it's something blocking us and something that causes us suffering, then it's suffering for him, just like anybody else that suffers, and therefore this concealment can bring a greater light. I mean, all the stories that you hear about the Rebbe and his concern for people, there's no end. There's no end to the stories, and the stories are all one more amazing than the other about how the Rebbe had in mind and cared about everybody and anybody, big or small, important, non-important, and that's because that's the definition of a nasi. A nasi is not about me. A nasi is someone who his function in life and his shlichus in life is to lead Bnei Yisrael. So in the year 1990, Tafshin Nun, the Rebbe gave this out to everybody, men, women, and children. And what is this? This is when the Friedgiver went out of jail. Like I said before, the condition was that he has to leave Russia. And where did he go to? Went to Latvia. When did he leave? Not right after the jail. He was still in Russia a few months. And he left the day after Simchas Torah. And the Rebbe describes emotionally how difficult it was to leave Russia, to leave Hasidim and his family, who he knew was suffering there. But nevertheless, this is part of a divine plan, like I said before, eventually come to America and do it globally. So in Latvia, the Frierdiker Rebbe then wrote this kuntras. He gave a mimer, a letter, and that was the first one about celebrating Yud Beis Tammuz. And that's the sheet that I gave out. That's the letter that he wrote to the first celebration. So it says on it, the 15th of Sivan, that's the day he was arrested. But the year was Tafresh Peches, which is 1928. There's so many things that I would like to do, but I'm not going to read the Hebrew. I'll do it like I did last time. I'll read it in English, but I'll follow the Hebrew text. So it'll take a bit less time. So the letter is sent out to all of Anashim, all Hasidim, and everybody that Torah is precious to them, and everybody that that Torah, people study Torah, people occupy themselves with Torah is precious to them. Yidden all over, and it starts off saying as follows. Today is the first day that I was arrested in this jail, which is called Shpalerna, in the city of Leningrad, which is today Petersburg. I was in the 6th division, and the room that I was in was 160. Everything was precise. And I was arrested Tuesday night, when in the Parsha we had the words, V'ata Yigdanu Koyach Hashem, the 15th of Sivan, in the year Toperish Pezayim, 1927. And that's where I was suffering until the first day of the Parsha, Matayvu Alecha Yaakov Mishkan Yisecha Yisrael. That's in the Parsha of Balak. That was the 3rd day of Tammuz. On that day, I had to go out to exile to the city of Kostroma and to be there for 3 years. Everybody knows that the arrest and the gullahs that I had came through informers who were unfortunately our own brothers who hated us. They hated Yiddishkeit, Moshe and Yisrael. But what they did was against the real legitimate rules of the country. In other words, they stretched the rules. They made it as if we're not allowed to do what we're doing. And these people, they couldn't tolerate, they couldn't accept that Yiddishkeit was being spread all over the country. And therefore they created these false accusations to crush me. And by crushing me, they would chas v'shalom destroy everything there is in Yiddishkeit. Chazli Hashem k'lisomnu, in the schus of my fathers, my holy forefathers, the Eibishter helped me, that they went with me. And on the 12th day of Tammuz, it was on a Tuesday, where it says in the pasuk, Hinini Noison le'izbrisi shalom, that's when I had my redemption. But Hashem didn't just take me out of Golus on Yud Beis Tammuz, but in essence, this was a redemption for everybody who Torah is dear to them, and everybody who observes mitzvahs, and everybody and anybody that just identifies as a Jew. Because every Yid, in essence, his heart is with Hashem. And therefore, this was a victory and a redemption for every Yid. Today is the 12th day of Tammuz, the day of the Geula, for all Yidden that are involved with spreading Torah. In other words, they claim that it's illegal to give a Torah class. But the truth is, on that day, it became known, because legally they had to free him from jail, that it is legally permissible, according to the legal law of the land, people have the right to keep Torah and to spread Torah teaching. So this day that Hashem pushed away the dark clouds for the informers and people who create false libels, this day should be a day of Farbrengens, and we should inspire ourselves to strengthen Torah and strengthen Yiddishkeit in every place. And we should all together bless our brothers that are in Russia, which are unfortunately still suffering from those people. Hashem should give them the strength for them and their children. They should be able to be dedicated to Yiddishkeit, and that these people should no longer be able to torture them. Then he says, I want to give a bracha to all of our brothers and all those that they give shiurim publicly, that Hashem should open his treasures of goodness and give them amongst all Jews tremendous abundance of life and bracha. Should give them the strength to continue to spread Torah and strengthen Yiddishkeit. They should all merit to see children and grandchildren that will be engaged in Torah study and the observance of mitzvahs in abundance and in good parnasa. In the beginning of that year, 1927, Tavrish Pei Zayin, I came to Hasidim with a request that they should set aside every single day in shul after Shachris. They should say the Tillim as it's broken up to the days of the month. Until then, it wasn't a known custom. But we know today as Chitas. And I want to say that this is something which should continue. The bottom is a footnote. I want to read the footnote. The footnote was written by a chassid. His name was Rabbi Chaim Altois. He was a famous chassid, and he was very close to the Frierdiker Rebbe. Was not family, but he was close as if he was a child. And he writes the following. The beginning of this year, which is 1927, everybody who was near the Rebbe was filled with dread. And even the Rebbe himself, we saw there was something going on. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe actually went to Kostroma, there was a chassid that went along with him. His name was Michal Dvorkin. And these are the words the Rebbe said in Yiddish. For Topresh Pei Zayin, the year Topresh Pei Zayin, 1927, I was very afraid. I wasn't worried about myself. I was worried about Chassidim. Before I told everyone to start saying Tillim, it wasn't so easy. In other words, when the Rebbe tells us to do something, he knows that it's going to be something new, it's going to be something hard. Like people are thinking about the Rambam, Rambam 3 chapters a day or 1 chapter a day, every single day Rambam. The Rebbe thinks about it long and hard. In fact, there's a famous Yechidus that the Rebbe told the Chassid that his name was Rabbi Emina. The Rebbe told him that either half or 3/4 of the things that he really wanted to come out with, he didn't, because he knew that the Chassidim wouldn't be able to handle it. So we're thinking now, wow, what we have, all these directives and things to do, is really just a fraction of what the Rebbe would have wanted us to do. But he saw they won't be able to handle it, so he didn't come out with it. What he did come out with is because he was able to evaluate the situation, that we could handle it and we could do it. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said it wasn't so easy. And this chassid said to the Frierdiker Rebbe, when did you tell us to say Tillim? And he answered, on Simchas Torah. And then I remembered that on Simchas Torah, the Frierdiker Rebbe spoke a lot about saying Tillim. And he spoke a lot about saying Tillim, the way it's broken up into the days of the month. And in fact, I asked the Rebbe myself, is this okay? I say Tillim before davening every day. Is that good enough? And the Rebbe said, no, that's a different kind of Tillim. I'm talking about Tillim that has to be said after the davening. In other words, it looks like the Frierdiker Rebbe said something and the Hasidim just didn't get it. They didn't realize that this was a directive, and I want you to do this every single day. And obviously he saw that something really frightening is coming this year and we need a big bracha. And that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe is referring to. So let's turn the page. You should do it in every shul. This has nothing to do with which Hasidic group you belong to. All Yidden should be saying Tillim every single day. And on the bottom, on this page, they have a quote from the Frierdiker Rebbe, what he said when he spoke about saying Tillim. It starts like this. Hert Chasidim. Look at the bottom of the page. Listen, Chasidim. All Yidden who hope for Mashiach, tell them in my name. When you talk to Chasidim, tell them that I'm telling them to do it. In other words, the Rebbe is commanding them to do it as a Rebbe. every single day, Shabbos also, say the Tillim as it's broken up into the days of the week. And this applies to people that go to work and people that are learning, everybody. That's for people who are Hasidim. They should know this is a directive and order. When you're talking to other Yidden who are not Hasidim, tell them that inside Avos Yisrael, and for the benefit of Yidden, I'm begging them, they should do this. The Eibusher should help them, and that's Chus. We'll have a good year, Begashmis Beruchnius. We'll have the Gula through Mashiach. And apparently this was written before Rosh Hashanah. That's why he gave the bracha for a good year. And of course, Hasidim make a point that it says here, all those that are hoping for Mashiach, which it looks like the idea of saying Tillim is not only connected because that's what you need to say when, God forbid, there's a crisis, but Tillim is the sefer of David HaMelech, who is the source of the Malchus of Mashiach. And it appears like saying Tillim and saying a lot of Tillim has to do with revealing the Malchus of King David in this world, which is Mashiach. So that was the letter, how it all started. And then from that point on, every year it's a Yom Tov. We don't say Tachnun, not on the 12th day of Tammuz, not on the 13th day of Tammuz. And of course, we need to strengthen ourselves. The Rebbe would always say, if the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Hasidim could do what they did in those days, under those circumstances, in that country, then we, who Baruch Hashem live in a free country, we're not being persecuted, we have the freedom to do whatever it needs. We have these little tests here and there. Surely we have the strength to overcome those challenges and to spread Chassidus and strengthen other Yidden around us and do everything we can to bring Mashiach. I'd also like to add another thing, and that is when we talk today about Mashiach, and then people say, but I don't know what you're talking about. When you sit here in the classroom and you're reading a sikh about Mashiach, it sounds very exciting. But as soon as you walk outside on Eastern Parkway, everything looks pretty much the same. Then if you take the train to Manhattan, you really see Mashiach all over the place. I mean, the world is just the same. What's changed? Iran is threatening with this, and the Hamas is threatening with that, and they're shooting missiles. And now there was a leftist government in Eretz Yisrael. Like, only when you look here, don't take your eyes out of the safe, because then you're going to see a different world. It doesn't look like anything's going to happen. So I always think to myself, if you would stop someone on the street in 1927, and you say, there's a war going on here. Who's the war? Between whom and who? The communist regime, Russia, which had, 200 million people, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe. What does he have? He has Hasidim. Do they have any weapons? No. They train soldiers? No. And the Hasidim are sitting in a basement somewhere having a farbrengen. Nothing exists besides Hashem. The whole world is non-existent. It's all a big one. Yeah, it's not the real thing. This is MS. You're arrested. Siberia. And they're still farbrengen that everything is above mices. And if you would ask someone of those days, so what do you see in the future? You have communism on one end. You have the Frierdiker Rebbe and Lubavitch on the other end. What do you think will be the future? And then imagine after that, the Frierdiker Rebbe yet gets arrested. And he is the driving force of all the activity of strengthening Yiddishkeit in Russia. And people are being sent off to Siberia. And people are, God forbid, being executed. And now the Rebbe himself is in the jail. Anybody in his normal mind would say, listen, the future, unfortunately, looks very bleak. Not just bleak, it looks almost impossible. You look back, now, what do you see now? Communism, which is so powerful, is a non-existent entity. It's like the biggest humiliation that could ever be. Not that a country, there are other countries that like even Germany, they fought and this and that, but they're still a country. They're just not what they used to be. But here you find a regime that became non-existent entity. On the other hand, Lubavitch is growing by leaps and bounds. It's having an impact on the whole world. It's spreading to the whole world. So because Torah is emes and godliness is emes, so we see that. And therefore we have to apply this to ourselves, even though we don't see it with our eyes now. But we're told that Mashiach is coming and the Gul is coming, and we shouldn't be discouraged. So therefore, we should try to look now with the eyes that will be seeing things in the future, in the near future. And basically, what we'll see is that everything that the Rebbe told us is emes. And just like then, regarding communism, we see how it all fell apart. And now we see how Yiddishkeit and Torah, especially Lubavitch, which is the arch enemy, is blossoming and growing and spreading. That's the way it's going to be with Mashiach as well. And of course, what I wanted to learn today, but I didn't get a chance to do it, so I'll do it tomorrow, is that it was an assignment. It was a big test. It wasn't simple. Believe me, it wasn't simple. And when I'm saying these words, I don't even know what I'm talking about, because unless you experience it, you can't even begin to understand what kind of test it was to live in Russia, to spread Chassidus, and to be hiding somewhere, and you know that they're looking after you, and if they, God forbid, find somebody, that's the end. And so this is also a test. It's a different kind of test, but it's also a test. It's a test in Amunah. So tomorrow I wanted to learn part of a mimer about the Inyan of a Nesoyim, a test, how we're supposed to deal with it, and how we're supposed to approach it. So hopefully by tomorrow we'll have no more tests. Mashiach will be here.
Amen.
In case Chas v'Shalom, there's still something to talk about, we'll do that tomorrow.
Rabbi Majeski,
Yes.
what was the point of the fact that it became, quote, legalized? I mean, it was already legal, and then it came out, yes, it is legal to give, let's say, publisher, but not in actuality, nothing really changed in Russia. I mean, are you saying that's the same kind of thing you were just saying, that it made some kind of a something, like some kind of a,
It made a crack and a dent, and it broke the klipa
oh,
at that time.
not that
was-
came out into
It was a defeat for them. Now, because it was a defeat for them, that means on a higher spiritual level, it was a defeat for the klipa that was behind them.
I see, so like bit by bit, like what led to the.
Right. The Rebbe explains that what happened in 1990, that communism fell apart completely, started then. Morning, Rabbi. Morning, Mrs.